In terms of a skill from, interpersonal effectiveness, is there one that you remember helping with your relationships initially?
I'd have to say the give skill, because I started to reflect and realize that because of all of the inner chaos that I was experiencing in relationships and just otherwise, I was hyper focused on my own experience and my own needs in a certain way. And this was not necessarily nurturing to my relationships. So I learned the give skill, which is be gentle, act interested, validate, and use an easy manner. And I want to giggle because we were just discussing how sometimes it can be difficult to recall the acronyms. There are a lot of acronyms in DBT. The reason why this skill is so helpful to me is because it helped me to realize that when my priority in the moment was to nurture the relationship, because we have different priorities in interpersonal effectiveness depending on the situation in the moment. We might be working on trying to get an objective met, so trying to get something that we need in a healthy way. We might be working on our self-respect and not compromising that in a certain situation or interaction. And then another focus is nurturing that relationship. So I feel like this helped to open my heart to express more compassion for other people, to really open me up to more empathy, to understand that it wasn't just about my needs. And I'm not self-judging, because these are survival mechanisms that we learn when we're emotionally dysregulated as children, etc. But this particular skill helped me to see it, to see things from someone else's perspective, and to be willing to go there, to soften, and to give, actually, as it were, to give to the other person as a gesture of wanting to show interest and wanting to nurture that relationship.
Right. Because sometimes people with BPD or who are emotionally sensitive, they're, often people are described as being selfish or self-centered, which I think is kind of an inaccurate description, but it can come across that way in relationships if the suffering of the person who's emotionally sensitive is all encompassing. And so it sounds like that skill really helped you start to bridge more from your suffering and connect with other people rather than kind of stay just in your own pattern all the time.
When you said all encompassing, I'm like, ding, 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 ding. Because I think for those of us who experienced this or who experience it currently, it's the chaos within is just so present, because it really does feel, before you start to learn the give skill, at least for me, that you're constantly flooded with emotional pain and suffering. So it really is difficult. There's like that barrier to being able to fully understand like the impact on someone else in a difficult situation, because we become so preoccupied, not by choice either, we're just flooded. And so that was a real awakening for me, to realize like that something else was happening. I know it might sound so funny, and that, we talk about it with BPD, we can be so empathetic in certain situations or for animals or for causes. But when it comes to difficult moments in relationship where our stuff is triggered or our trauma is coming up, it can be difficult to move past that because of where our nervous systems are at in that moment. So learning the give skill helped me to begin to practice to step into the other person's shoes, to be able to understand that even if I couldn't access that empathy because my emotions were so intense in that moment, I could still practice this and nurture the relationship and not harm the relationship until my nervous system could calm down and actually genuinely feel that.
Yeah.
So some of what DBT is it feels counterintuitive because we've never related to others in this way, or we never learned how to naturally respond to others in this way. And it makes a difference, and over time it does become more natural and more intuitive and feel safe to be vulnerable in that way.
Well, and then it creates that feedback loop where if you feel like you're in an emotional tornado, but you practice acting interested, even if you don't really feel that interested, but you act that way, and then the other person responds in the same, and then you act again, and then the person sticks around, and it goes back and forth. That is how things start to more, that deeper rewiring, that deeper internal repair happens. And often it is at the beginning, like you're saying, acting in a way that doesn't feel natural so that we can receive a different response from people that maybe we haven't received before. And that first attempt to try something that feels unnatural is such a risk, but it's really how I've seen, and you're describing, people make longer term change because they get a different response, and then it validates that new behavior.
Yeah,
so thank
totally.
you for sharing that.
We've had a giggle before about how Dr. Linehan called the skill act interested, not be interested. So, to what you just said. And I think it can be really helpful too, with this particular skill and with acting interested, sometimes feeling more counterintuitive than the other parts. Like if you think about it from a perspective of if you easily get frustrated if your child is looking for attention and you have other things that you need to do, or your spouse is telling you something about an interest that's like really fascinating to them but very boring to you. It can be so helpful, and you can see in real time how effective it is to just literally stop and act interested and validate that person, the I and V and give, and just be like, oh, that's a really beautiful rock. You're really good at finding those. Okay, I need to get back to this now. Or, oh, that's awesome that you love, that sounds like such an awesome moment you had snowboarding. I can't even imagine like how cool that felt. And then you get back to what you were doing. It's like, it's a gesture of love. It's a gesture of, I think, respect, and like one of the things that sometimes our students will say is like, aren't you asking me to be fake? Aren't you asking me to be phony? Like, aren't I like compromising my true self by doing this? And I totally get that because of how it feels. Like even to this day, like if I'm stressed out or I'm really busy with something and someone comes in with a distraction, sometimes like I'll automatically go to like, but I know that it's effective. And I want to be effective. And that's what we teach a lot in DBT is like, is this going to be effective? Now I can grunt and get like all like angry and be like, I'm busy right now. Can't you see? Or whatever it is. And maybe sometimes I do that. And I can see the contrast between what that leads to. Now I'm delayed even more doing what I want to do because there's a conflict to be resolved. But if I take the time to actually practice that skill and act interested, just take a moment. That can be so effective in terms like if my goal is to get back to my work as soon as possible, then that skill could be really effective in that moment. So there's so many ways that we can apply these skills, not just in the context of a romantic relationship, but in our relationships with everyone.
Another thing that people struggle with initially in DBT is like with the give skill or skills in general, interpersonally, is feeling like, why should I work so hard if other people aren't? Or why should I be interested if the other person isn't interested? Kind of, that power struggle a little bit. If I'm not getting my needs met, why should I help someone else that I'm with? And I'm wondering what you would say to that.
That's a tough one. I think it's two-part. For me, I think it's important to work on it for my own healing, for my own journey, so that I feel that I'm acting from a place of integrity and doing what I know to be helpful and skillful and effective. If the other person is really resistant or not really putting in an effort, I think that that's going to require bringing in another skill. So there's a skill in interpersonal effectiveness called Dear Man, where we express to another person what's going on for us and ask for what we need. And I think that that's what I would do, because I wouldn't say, well, just don't worry about it. Just do your thing. That's not realistic. It feels really uncomfortable and frustrating, and all kinds of other things when we're putting in all the effort and the other person isn't. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And if we have not really had a lot of practice in having these types of conversations and asking for what we need, that can feel really intimidating and inaccessible. So we do talk about that as well. Like, how do I, if this is the situation, how do I ask for what I need? Or how do I cope effectively if this person isn't giving me what I need?
Sometimes at the beginning too, people have to take a risk to try skills. And we emphasize that idea of, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And that's kind of confronting of, do I want to win this argument or do I want a peaceful relationship? And I think sometimes that core question in this module comes up a lot of, okay, do you want to use a skill so that you can have a more peaceful relationship or not? And that is always a choice. So.
And how do you not see that as self-sacrifice? And I think it's about balancing, when and where you use that. Yeah. Like if you're having an argument with your significant other before bed, I've learned this one, that, being effective might be saying something that is, really validating and calming, and then, asking to talk about it in the morning, as opposed to, like, even if I know I'm right, Catherine, if I know, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I'm right, and I could just keep going for hours. Like, is that effective? Is that healthy for me? No, I want to get to sleep and I want to get some rest. So how can I use this skill and take that risk? And that risk might be my own vulnerability. In some cases, when we're using skills, we're being vulnerable in the sense that we don't know how the other person is going to respond. If they'll be receptive, if they'll be supportive, if they're going to get upset with us. There's a real vulnerability there. But on the other side of the coin, there are times when we use the skills where we're bravely stepping into this vulnerability of humility. Our ego can be so strong and so overpowering that we feel that we are totally disrespecting ourselves if we choose to use a skill like this to be effective, for example, before going to bed. And can we live with that? And can we stand it? And can we live with the thoughts that the other person thinks they won, or or whatever? Right. Like, that can be so challenging for me personally. And I do know that I can go with that and act on the emotion and what the potential outcome will be of that, and it's not what I want. So what do I need to do to be effective? It might be opposite of what that urge is inspiring.
Well, thank you. It really helps to hear the firsthand experience of this more in depth.
Thank you.